So, I think some background is necessary first to explain how this behavior reached this level and why we responded the way we did. This is a long read, my apologies. For as long as I can remember, my parents loved my sister more. I don't mean in a subtle way either. If my sister accused me of something, they believed her and punished me. If I accused her, they wouldn't believe me. Even if there was irrefutable proof, they would give her a minor punishment and try to find a way to scold me at the same time. My birthday cake had to be whatever flavor she wanted, but hers didn't, and my parents always denied knowing I didn't like that kind of cake. They always bought her a little more than they bought me. We would go where she wanted, even if it was an event that should have been about me. My sister grew up spoiled and she didn't like me. She just used me as a punching bag. First she ignored me, but then it got very bad when we were teenagers. I'm not sure about the cause and effect, but she was left without friends, and her behavior worsened. Did her friends move away? Did they abandon her because she was mean? I don't know, because we were never very close, and my parents loved to brag about her achievements but never mentioned any problems. Whereas with me, they loved to constantly bring up any flaw of mine as material for ridicule. I only knew she didn't have any friends because we went to the same school, and I noticed she wasn't hanging around with people anymore. Anyway, she had no friends and I did. I used to be quite popular. My sister noticed, and suddenly I went from being the occasional punching bag to a hated person she had to tear down at all times. She started accusing me of more things and accused my friends of more things. My parents stopped allowing me to go out with anyone. The excuses ranged from "they aren't good people according to your sister" to "why are you trying to leave us? Why can't you be like your sister and enjoy family time?" What saved me from total isolation was our extended family. Most of my family lived in the same city, and I got along well with my cousins despite the age difference. At a gathering they invited me to something, I don't remember what, and I sadly replied that I couldn't go anywhere. When they asked why, my unfiltered child self responded that it was because I wasn't allowed to have friends since my sister didn't have any. Well, that got back to the adults, who apparently tore my parents to shreds. Afterward, they scolded me for lying and grounded me as if I had anywhere to go for a month. But after that they gave me some leeway, so it was worth it. And my sister changed schools. I guess the humiliation of the extended family knowing her social status sat poorly with her, and she demanded to be moved, and my parents immediately agreed. It cost them more because the school was farther away, but she made friends at the new school. However, she never returned to the previous status quo of mostly ignoring me. I guess having felt the power of how badly she could mess with me, and the anger that I told the family she had no friends, she never let it go. My life was still bad. Her friends would come over and bully me, and my parents would call it light-hearted teasing. I never invited my friends over because my parents were horrible hosts to them, or my sister would accuse them of things and they'd believe her. However, I became very close with my cousins, as my parents never dared to do any of that to family. And then I had my first boyfriend. I didn't want to bring him home, but my parents insisted. Well, at one point we were apart, and he came to find me to tell me that my sister was flirting with him. He meant she approached him in skimpy clothing, batting her eyelashes crudely, and started telling him how bad I was and how good she was. He got angry and ran to find me. Of course, my sister told my parents a different story, that my boyfriend had tried to flirt with her, but she naturally refused because she couldn't do that to me. Guess who my parents believed? My boyfriend wasn't perfect, but I immediately believed him for a petty reason. But remember, I was a teenager back then, suffering from unfair mistreatment. I was very resentful and moody, and by now I hated my sister as much as she hated me. With that disclaimer out of the way, let's talk about looks. I haven't mentioned it yet because it wasn't relevant. My parents were/are overweight, and since they like to show their love through food, giving you more food, buying you treats, my sister was/is also overweight, while I wasn't/am not. In fact, I've always been a bit thin because punishments usually didn't include treats or snacks. Obviously, weight isn't what matters, personality is, but my sister was already rude and spoiled back then. Her attempts at flirting were bad because she never learned to work for anything since she could just demand it and my parents would give it to her. Add to that the fact that she didn't look like a sexy model, and not even my teenage self-conscious self believed my boyfriend would try to cheat on me with her. Anyway, my parents forbade me from dating such a horrible boy. I tried to continue in secret, but it was difficult and the relationship ended. I got another boyfriend, but again, my sister accused him of flirting with her when he rejected her advances. My parents believed her again. I tried to explain how it had happened again, but they decided that meant I was incapable of making good decisions and kept choosing bad boyfriends. The relationship couldn't handle the Romeo and Juliet situation and failed again. In high school, I ended up being called a slut because I didn't mind making out with guys and things like that, but I refused to have relationships. Luckily, neither my sister nor my parents found out. My sister brought a boyfriend home during all this time. She paraded him around proudly, and my parents spent every second telling me how great he was, and why I couldn't be like my sister and find someone like that. Until he stopped showing up, and suddenly he was the scheming bastard who cheated on my sister. Oh well. And the unequal treatment continued. Around this time she had more spending money, her curfews were much better than mine, and she was free to go anywhere at any time while I couldn't. If I pointed it out, my parents would say it was because she was older. But when I reached that age, I still didn't get the same treatment as her, and when it was pointed out, they would deny ever saying it or claim it was because I wasn't trustworthy like her, using my sister's accusations against my boyfriends and friends as proof of my bad judgment. Time passes and it's time for my sister to graduate. She was accepted into a not-so-well-regarded university and had no scholarship or anything. Again, since they only told me about her achievements, I don't know which university she applied to, so I can't say how much she was rejected. What I do know is that she got bad grades in school because every time she got a B, we celebrated it. I used to get good grades, but my parents refused to celebrate, claiming that since I always got them, what was there to celebrate? My parents naturally made a big fanfare and told her they would pay for everything for her. I was relieved she was leaving. Not that it made my life any easier. She always came home every other weekend and somehow, things in her room would still go missing, or she'd come up with some other thing to make my life miserable. My curfews were still strict, etc. Eventually, my mother came to talk to me about my upcoming graduation. I'm only a year younger than my sister. She told me that since they were paying for my sister's university, they didn't have money to pay for mine, so it would be better for me to start working immediately after graduation and wait for my sister to finish college to see if they could afford something for me. Oh, and if I decided to stay at home, I would have to pay for all my own things, part of the bills and rent. I told her I could take out a student loan. Mom said yes except no. Meaning, since they were so loving towards me and I had such bad judgment, they would decide whether a university was worth me going into debt for or not. I'm not sure how they would prevent me from getting loans, but I didn't ask. They didn't mention scholarships. They had no idea about my grades and never believed in my abilities anyway. I didn't even blink. I just said okay. My mother clearly didn't expect that and kept insisting. Maybe she hoped I would throw a tantrum so they would have an excuse to never pay for my college, but I said nothing except that I understood their position. I thanked them for caring about me, and that was it. Later, my father tried the same thing, but I also refused to get emotional. After a lifetime of terrible parenting, I never had expectations regarding my education. I knew they would find an excuse not to pay for it. I never believed they would end up paying for it if I worked and waited for my sister to graduate. I had been preparing for college for a long time. I could barely go out, my friendships were scarce, so I had plenty of time to study. And I studied because I saw college as my only chance to be free. Well, the time came and I worked my butt off and got a scholarship. Not to anywhere like the Ivy League or anything like law or medical school, but it was a pretty good course at a decent university with a full scholarship. Knowing my sister would hate it and try to sabotage it, I told my family I was going to college and showed them the acceptance letter with the full scholarship. First, they were surprised, but they congratulated me, albeit a bit stiffly. Then I guess my sister got to them, and they switched gears and even asked if I was sure I wanted to go. They let it slip that my sister wasn't doing well in college, and since she was smarter and had better judgment than me, I would do worse. Obviously, I stood my ground. They weren't happy, but they couldn't do anything. College was my savior. I started to be happy. I still contacted my parents and visited on holidays and such, but since they refused to pay for anything, I could excuse myself from going much due to money. During this time, I avoided introducing them to any men, and my sister dropped out of college. I know she didn't graduate because, again, they would have made a fanfare about it. She moved back home without paying bills or rent, but it's different, my parents said. And she started working at the same company as my mother, obviously thanks to my mother pulling strings. All of this was sold to me as a source of pride, but oh well. Around that time I met my husband. You know those people who say, if I were in X situation I would have done something? My husband is one of those who actually does it. I'm the person who is meek and a doormat in any situation and then can't sleep at night wishing I had done something, had thought of something clever to say, etc. I'm the person who can't help but cry when I'm angry. My husband is the one who retorts immediately. He loves drama in the sense that he loves to resolve it. He's the type that if he doesn't respond immediately to a slight, you better start worrying because he's not going to forgive and forget but is instead plotting something worse for revenge. He's the one who wanted me to post here and wanted to post on a nuclear revenge forum too, but decided what we did wasn't nuclear. People were baffled that I got together with him, but just because I was incapable thanks to my upbringing, probably off acting like him didn't mean I didn't like it. I love that my husband does what I can't, and he treats people well as long as they do the same to him. When we talked about getting married, we decided we didn't care much for the ceremony due to our budget, as we preferred to spend on a dream trip to Europe for our honeymoon. As for the venue, since his family was very spread out and mine was still concentrated in my hometown, we decided to have it there. We didn't live too far away either, so we could make some long trips over the weekends to manage things. Plus, there was some work flexibility, so we could also stay in my city for a while if needed. We sent out the engagement announcement and the save the date for a few months later. At this point, my parents demanded to meet my man. I wanted to refuse, but it was difficult for me. The distance had made me think my parents weren't so bad. Well, my husband looked like Christmas had been cancelled when I told him. I would at least make sure they were never alone with him. You see, he had been preparing for this. He even bought a high-quality recorder that he could hide in a pocket to record everything. He was excited, thinking of all the ways he could reject my sister's advances, insult her, and then spread the recording of her attempts to my family. So, he went alone and excited to meet them and came back later euphoric. Honey, you won't believe the horrible thing they want. Honey, we can screw them over so much. There are so many possibilities. I was confused and wanted to hear the recording, but he cleverly told me it was better to hear from him first, or I would misunderstand. Well, he went there, and instead of flirting, my parents and my sister sat him down. After grumbling a bit about not agreeing with him, my judgment, etc., they proclaimed they were willing to pay for my wedding on one condition. My sister would walk down the aisle at my wedding first in a wedding dress. Their excuses were that it wasn't right for a younger sister to get married first, so it was only fair that my sister at least got the experience of doing it at my venue, with the photos, the dress, the cake, etc. My husband will write his part now. Vengeful husband here. Hell hath no fury like a revenge fan when his beloved is scorned. That said, as much as my wife describes me as a quick-witted guy, I admit my neurons almost short-circuited when those guys suggested that as if it were a gift. I think even Troy would rather take the horse a second time. Unfortunately, after my brain rebooted, I had a whole catalog of insults ready to unleash, but something in my soul whispered in my ear, string these bastards along. So I said I needed to think about it, see how my wife, then fiancée, would react, and I ran out of there before I could give away my nefarious plans. Back to me, the wife. So, my husband honestly told me how my parents wanted even my wedding to be about my sister, with a smile on his face, and he had the recording to prove it. I was stunned. The distance had softened how badly they treated me, and I thought that not even they would go this far. Luckily, my husband insisting on the revenge angle helped me not to go crazy. We had a blast coming up with ways to screw them over, from the ridiculously outlandish to what we deemed feasible. Then we called his much more sensible brother when we decided on a plan. It consisted of having 2 addresses for the venue, giving them the wrong address, etc. His much more sensible brother scolded us for it. Although he acknowledged he could never convince us against retaliation, he at least made us see that something like that would be difficult to pull off. Some of our other ideas also ran the risk of being sued. So in the end we settled on the most benign plan. Act as if we agreed, but then hire security and not let her in. The rest is mostly my husband's doing, but he wants me to do the honors, so here it goes. It's just important to mention that everything he did was previously discussed with me, and they were our mutual ideas. He went back to my parents, said he sounded me out, and thought I wouldn't agree. However, he didn't see the problem and, not wanting the family to fall apart, would be willing to help them do it. He pointed out that I don't like conflict, so if I was surprised with it, maybe I wouldn't throw a tantrum in front of everyone. On the other hand, marriage is a big deal, so who knew if I would get furious? So, he proposed a compromise. They would help pay for things. This way I would feel even more pressured not to say anything, as it would not only be public, well, with our families there, but I would also be grateful for the help they provided, and that would calm me down. He said my parents looked surprised, but my older sister started jumping for joy, literally, like a child, so it was accepted. Importantly, my husband also claimed that due to some bad judgment in boyfriends in the past, these words were all my idea, and I'm so proud of using their words against them, lol. I was suspicious and controlling and liked to check his phone and stuff to make sure he wasn't cheating on me. As such, it was imperative that none of this plan be put in writing. For anything related to my sister walking down the aisle before me, he would go to their house to talk. And so began the months of deception where my parents and sister thought they were tricking me, and my husband and I were milking them. How? Well, rather than just paying for the wedding and staying out of it, of course my parents wanted to intervene in everything. Some things that meant a lot to meth songs and the color palette me husband convinced them to let go of to keep me in line. But since we never cared about the ceremony to begin with, everything else was fair game, or so they thought. What we did was this: we would go, for example, to check the drink and menu options. Then we would agree on the cheapest or second cheapest option. Then my husband would secretly bring my sister to also taste and would sigh and say it was a shame we didn't want to abuse my parents' goodwill, so we wouldn't be getting the best options. Then my sister would demand my parents pay for the best. My parents would tell me not to worry and that they would pay for the most expensive. We did the same with the photographer. The flowers, me husband handed my sister a bouquet with the flowers we wanted, and then sadly expressed that I wanted other, tacky flowers. My parents told me they wanted us to choose those flowers and that they would pay for them. The wedding dress, here we had a small problem. My parents wanted me to wear a horrible dress. Okay, not that horrible, but it wasn't my style and didn't fit me that well. We had planned to say yes and then just not wear it, but my mother messaged me about it so there would be proof that I had said yes. We had to go with my refusal in the text and stand firm. My husband went there and said he would see what he could do. My sister suggested ruining my desired dress, so I would be forced to wear the other one. He pretended to agree. Throughout this time, they really kept communication out of any texts. We made sure that happened. When my sister tried to message my husband, he would have me reply. To them, this solidified the claims of me being controlling and neurotic that my husband was making, so they bought it and never risked anything in writing. And some people might not like the idea of their partner going around bad-mouthing them to family, but I'm such a doormat that the idea of being painted as a controlling, dangerous shrew makes me laugh, and I encouraged him to do it. I guess I have a twisted sense of humor, lol. Oh, and my sister tried to flirt with him, but he acted conflicted. Also, to really sell that he was with them, my husband would pretend to tell them things without my knowledge, but he never told them we had hired security. It was hilarious. My husband and I, who had honestly considered a courthouse wedding to focus the cost on our honeymoon, were having this extravagant and expensive wedding and barely spending a cent. We called it retroactive payment for emotional damages from my parents. I think my husband is okay. He just confirmed was enjoying deceiving them more than planning our wedding. I didn't think it was possible to witness a man happy at the thought of losing his entire Saturday on a road trip to discuss wedding details with his in-laws, but here we are. Soon the day arrived. The plan my parents/sister/husband had come up with was to wait until everyone was seated. Since the bride is always late, they would have my sister arrive at that precise moment to prevent me from seeing her and trying to stop it, and she would walk down the aisle. By the time I found out what happened, it would be too late to do anything. As for my dress, we saved some of the leftover fabric from the alterations, and my husband took it to my parents' house, my sister still lives with them, and showed it to her as proof that he had ruined the dress. He said he had to get back to me because I was furious and needed calming, and that he would see them at the wedding. We made sure to keep our real security hidden at first. As guests and my parents arrived, all they saw was a woman with a list of names to check. Only when my parents arrived and sat down did we bring out the security, a guy who looked like a bodyguard. We told him not to let my sister in and even agreed to pay him a good tip if he didn't reveal that we had told him that. Soon it was time. My parents received a message that my sister was less than 5 minutes away. So, my father went and told people to start. I had told my bridesmaids to go along with it beforehand, so they obeyed without consulting me. When everyone went down and took their places, my father stood at the entrance as if waiting for me. At that moment, a friend who wasn't in the wedding party texted me to get ready. Because if my husband, bridesmaids, etc. took out their phones and started texting, people would notice. This friend was in on the plan. He's a friend of my husband, as willing to help stir up drama as he is, and didn't care about being part of the party or anything. Well, as soon as my father took his position, the wedding song began to play. The doors open and I walk in. My father had a look of astonishment seeing me there. He tried to look behind me, but from where we were, you couldn't see the venue entrance, so he couldn't see what was happening with my sister. And then his phone rang. I saw the caller ID, it was her. He left me there with a mumbled. Something came up. There were gasps and confusion everywhere. The friend asked me loudly what had happened. I lied in a tearful voice, telling him he had told me I didn't need to be there. It's not what he said, but my husband and I agreed that if he dared to leave me, I should say that to make him look as bad as possible. As for the tears, I wish I could say it was just my stellar performance, but no. Despite everything, a part of me didn't think he would go so far as to abandon me there, that the sister thing wasn't true but an elaborate joke, I don't know. I was hurt. I still am. So I was honestly trying not to cry. The friend then said loudly, "What do you mean it shouldn't be you?" So that as many people as possible would hear and spread it. Then he said, "I'll go check," and ran out. We decided to do this so she would create hell with security and prevent my dad from coming back and stopping the ceremony or something. At some point my mother also left. At that moment my husband's father quickly ran to me and took my arm. He had been warned he might have to. Seeing him desperately run towards me helped me smile. I walked down the aisle amidst whispers as people commented on what happened. Apparently some also went out to check. However, when I reached my husband, everything was fine. He made me feel better by joking that my sad face was so real it deserved an Oscar and not to worry. He would chew them out for what they had done. We got married without a hitch. My parents didn't come back. I noticed many people leaving and returning during the party, but no one dared to tell me what was happening. Someone came up and whispered in my husband's ear, who then left. He came back after a while with a thunderous expression, but he whispered in my ear that he had to hide somewhere before he broke character and started smiling. Well, what happened is that it worked. What follows is the summarized account from friends, family, the security guy, and my husband that I received later. My sister arrived in a wedding dress. The security guards refused to let her in. Per our agreement, he said she must have the wrong venue because there was already a bride, and yes, we gave him a good tip as promised. My father went there and tried to threaten him with the police, claiming he'd never heard of him, so he couldn't be working there. Security agreed to the police since he had been hired by us and was doing his job. My father realized it would be too late by then and tried to demand he let my sister in. At that moment, the friend came and started yelling and insulting my sister and asking what was going on, basically stalling. My mother soon arrived and eventually other people. At this point, the wedding plan went to hell. All my parents could do now was damage control, as everyone who found out was horrified that they tried to pull it off and were yelling and reprimanding them. The three of them naturally said it was no secret and threw my husband under the bus. At that moment they called my husband. When he came, he put on his best confused face and denied. To quote him, he denied ever agreeing to something so ridiculous. When they insisted he demanded proof, and of course they couldn't produce any. All the text exchanges they could produce were about normal wedding decisions. My sister was crying her eyes out and was apparently sitting on the floor kicking her feet like a toddler. My father looked like he was going to hit my husband, but security and other people restrained him. Of course, they said they had no proof because my husband told them not to text. My husband laughed and said, "Wow, how convenient, huh?" And then he repeated, why would he ever agree to something so vile? He chewed them out for being horrible parents, then said he wasn't going to let their stupid plans and lies get in the way of his wedding and came back to me. No one believed them. The wedding venue had cameras, But they refused to show me the footage because it was for security reasons only. But some people filmed parts. Seeing my parents and sister get torn apart by each, and every person who went out to check on the drama was delicious. After years and years of being accused of things and not being believed, seeing them get a taste of the same was one of the best wedding gifts. My mother was crying, my father kept changing from purple to white, my sister was still on the floor crying and screaming. They kept insisting my husband was in on it, but people kept asking why my husband would agree, why there was no proof, why they would want my sister to do this at my wedding, and they didn't have a good answer to any of them. In the end, they were told to leave and had no choice but to do so. Apparently, my father had to drag my sister because she refused to get off the floor. Again, people didn't tell me anything all night. I guess they wanted to spare me, and maybe it's because for once I was the bride and not just a guest, but it felt like everyone was making an extra effort to be kind, positive, and excited about everything. My husband says all the free food and drink they were eating and drinking certainly helped. We had a great time. My husband kept the forced angry face for a short time before going back to smiling. Afterward, we went to the hotel to get some sleep before leaving for our honeymoon. Speaking of which, my parents tried to pay for our plane tickets, but we thought it was risky because they could try to cancel them or something, so we refused. Of course, since then, the three of them have tried to contact me. I've rejected the calls because my husband insisted on keeping a paper trail. A smart thing because my sister eventually messaged me. I won't repeat it because it was very unhinged and didn't make much sense, but the important part was that she blamed me for her humiliation, called my husband a two-faced snake who deceived them for months, he wants to print it and put it on our wall, and hoped he would cheat on me too. She suggested he was cheating on me with her, in fact. My husband took my phone, screenshotted the call logs, screenshotted my sister's message, screenshotted some messages from my parents demanding I pick up the phone, and sent it all to my family's group chat. He sent them screenshots of messages where they insulted and threatened him, but he kept up the "you're delusional, I never agreed to anything" act and even threatened to sue them for defamation and harassment. He wrote a message and said group chat pleading for my family's help as they were now constantly harassing me. He begged the family to help stop them from trying to ruin my honeymoon now that they had failed to ruin my wedding. Then he ended it perfectly with a request that they not share our locations to prevent my parents from sending my sister, and then claiming he had somehow agreed to pretend to sleep with her in our honeymoon suite. My family assured him they would handle it, and sure enough, we've had silence since then. My husband is a little disappointed that my sister didn't disobey, so he could snitch on her again while rubbing it in her face. Ultimately, while I obviously would have preferred to have a normal, loving family at my wedding, at least for once in my life, not only did they not ruin something significant for me, but they were the ones who suffered the consequences. Extra info. I know why they treat me this way. I've been asked this question many times, so I assume you're all thinking the same thing. I've wondered my whole life and still don't know. I tried to ask when I was young, but they denied any difference and scolded me for acting like a brat, so I stopped trying. I've thought of many possibilities, but based on my observations, I believe it's the following. I was unplanned. It took them a while to have my sister, so she was not only wanted but also like a miracle child after so long. However, given our age difference is quite small, I think they didn't expect to have a child so soon or so easily and didn't use proper protection too soon after my sister's birth, and maybe they didn't realize my mother was pregnant until it was too late. So they had to deal with an unplanned baby while dealing with a newborn, and they aren't very wealthy, so the extra expense probably didn't help. So they were stuck with me. But those are my conjectures. In any case, I've accepted that the answer won't really matter. What they did to me was unjustified either way. Did they really think this would work? My husband and I talked, and we have a theory that they never wanted to do this at all. We think my sister threw a tantrum about me getting married first when she barely dates, and they made that outlandish proposal to my husband because they didn't want to pay for my wedding and didn't think we would agree or that it would look good if they did. But by suggesting it and being rejected, they could look like the good guys to my sister while also having an excuse not to give me a cent. But then my husband accepted, and they couldn't back out or they risked my sister turning on them. This is all that OP has shared so far. Subscribe to find out what other problems her family brings her in the future, and how she and her husband will get revenge. See you in the next video.